Sure, it's 7 o'clock, and we want to be comfortable with everybody's time and making respectful of everybody's schedule. So, is it on? Can you hear me? Okay, sorry, I wasn't close enough. So, my name is Debbie Grass. I want to welcome everybody here tonight to the City of Beaver Falls Home Rule Charter Government Study Committee. It's a public hearing. Um, I'm a local government consultant who has worked with the city for a few years now and helped to provide technical support to the Home Rule Study Commission. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we got started here. But before I do that, I want to introduce the other members of our team who worked with the commission in drafting the charter. So first we have Bonnie Brimmeyer, who is an attorney and provided some legal advice as we waded through the mounds of information and the language that we needed to have to construct the charter. And with us tonight too, we have Michael Foreman, who is from the Department of Community and Economic Development. And Michael has been working with the city for a few years on a number of issues. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Thank you, Debbie. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you taking the time and interest to be here to hear more about the proposed draft Home Rule Charter that will go before the voters November of this year in the general election. Again, by way of introduction, I am Michael Foreman with the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. We're a state agency under the jurisdiction of the governor, and I work as a local government policy specialist. I and the department have been working with the City of Beaver Falls for a few years, initially through the Strategic Management Planning Program that we offer to municipalities that provides technical assistance and financial management assistance as well with regard to communities that ask for assistance with respect to their finances, their tax base, and opportunities for growth and development. With that being said, the report that Grassroots Solutions did, Debbie Grass is the principal of the firm and her team, they produced a report, one of which had a recommendation in that suggested that the city form a government study commission. And the key word really is elect a government study commission made up of 7 members. And those folks are here tonight to represent and to convey information about the proposed Home Rule Charter. As Debbie indicated, she served as a technical assistant along with Attorney Brimmeyer with regard to helping to draft the Home Rule Charter. I also served as an advisor to the Government Study Commission on the drafting of the Home Rule Charter with regard to the document that's going to be presented this evening. So I wanted to take a few minutes to introduce myself and explain what role the department has played and will continue to play, continuing to work with the City of Beaver Falls to help implement other recommendations that deal with technology and community and economic development, that also deal with housing issues, as well as policies and procedures, and hopefully working with the city to implement the Home Rule Charter that the voters will decide November 2nd to vote yes or no for. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. So we're here tonight to assist the commission. The commission members are going to talk to you about the charter, about what is in the charter and how it's going to be beneficial to the residents of Beaver Falls. Couple housekeeping things. We want everybody to sign in if we could. This is a public hearing, and we will be keeping a record of who attended, and we're recording this. I should mention that we are recording this meeting because it is a public meeting. So why consider Home Rule Charter? Municipalities all across the Commonwealth look at this. There are codes in place for cities. There are separate codes and specific codes for boroughs and townships. But what a Home Rule Charter does is allow the citizens themselves to decide how their government's going to be structured and exactly how it's going to operate. And so a lot of communities are beginning to look at this and have actually over the decades looked at this as a way of self-government. So the problem, as Michael said, we were here to do the strategic management planning program with the city for about 18 months. And the city has a long and proud history of achievements, and we respect the tradition, but they were facing many significant challenges. And some of those were, they were looking at multi-year deficits, we're looking at aging infrastructure, we're looking at some declining property values. The city had tried to adjust itself to face those by reducing personnel and reducing staff. And we, of course, as most older cities, it was facing a lot of blight and vacant property issues. So we looked at all those issues when we were putting together the strategic plan. As Michael said, the city partnered with DCED to prepare a multi-year financial management plan under the STAMP program. And some of the things that were recommended, the city is already implementing. They're already looking at revenue enhancements. They're already looking at some things that we recommended in terms of cost containment. They're looking, and we help them look at the staffing, the structure, the way they deliver services, and we are supporting them in ways of technology and some other things to help them become a more modern, more efficient organization. But one of the things that we did recommend as part of our planning process was to take a look at this idea of home rule charter. Like I said, it's self-government. It allows the city to structure its government workforce and how they govern and how they run their departments. It actually allows the city to do that instead of having Harrisburg sort of dictate what you have to do, when you have to do it, how you have to do it. So tonight we want to explain what the differences will be in the way the city would be structured under a home rule charter and why we think there are benefits for the city in moving forward with that. Ultimately, this will be a vote by you, the residents of Beaver Falls. So it's up to us to explain ourselves, to let people know exactly what's going on, and for the voters to actually make a decision about this, whether or not this is the right way for them to go. Right now, I want to introduce, because we only assisted, the commission did all the work. We assisted them, we provided legal advice, we provided technical assistance, but the commission themselves made all the decisions and have drafted the charter. So I'm going to recognize right now Regina Jones, who is the chairperson of the commission, and she's going to introduce the rest of the commission members. And here's your, there you go.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to see community involvement and people out to get information. It's always good to be well informed. As the slide says, in June of 2020, there was a question on the ballot as to whether the city of Beaver Falls should look into maybe adopting a home rule charter. That was voted yes. And then there were, I can't remember exactly how many people ran to serve on the commission, but the ones who actually had the highest votes ended up forming the commission. And that would be myself, and it's in alphabetical order after the chair. Michael Anderson, Kirsten Bester, Doug Carson, Jerry Ford, who is not with us. He had hip surgery, so he could not be with us. Neil McDowell, Bethany Warren had a death in the family, so she also is not with us. And Ray Gutowski is our alternate in the event that one of us would fall ill or couldn't fulfill our duties. So we are each going to take a moment to tell you a little bit about ourselves and why we ran, but I wanted to do a little bit more housekeeping before we do that. First of all, you know, with every meeting, we ask you to put your phones on vibrate, please. And restrooms, if you've never been in the high school LGI, there you can see them clearly on my right, straight back. They're open, kind of. There's a sign-up sheet that we hope everyone signed in when you came. And also on that sign-up sheet, there was boxes that you can check. If you would like a copy of the drafted charter and a copy of the final report, just check those boxes and put your email address. You will get a digital copy that you may print out as many as you need to share with friends, family, neighbors, whatever. Check those boxes, you will receive it digitally. And I do believe that was all of the housekeeping that I have. So some of you may know that I taught in the Beaver Falls School District here in this building for a number of years. I've lived in Beaver Falls all of my life, and for that reason, I don't want to see it just deteriorate. I want the community to thrive and grow and prosper. So I ran just because it's a feasibility study. I was interested to see, okay, how would this work? Will it work? Is it something that's actually better or is it not? I was curious. And then I kind of thought I can always use my English skills if they needed somebody to check grammar. And that's why, kind of why I ran. So we are going to go in alphabetical order and take turns introducing ourselves. So next up would be Mr. Anderson.
Good evening.
Speak in the mic.
We have people here. We have people.
They want to see you in
Oh.
Facebook land or wherever's going
Oh,
on.
okay. Good evening. My name is Michael Anderson. And I'm a lifelong resident of Beaver Falls. My wife Janice and I have raised 3 children. They all went to school, graduated from Beaver Falls High School, went on to now they're positive adults. They're contributing to their communities and they're doing fine. The home rule charter question, and for me, was when Councilman Kunzel gave a presentation at council. I believe that's where it was at. And it was amazing. He outlined the financial needs of the city and where those needs were headed. And he explained what the options were. And obviously that the worst option would have been the
I'm trying to get it closer. Get a little closer.
little closer.
There you go.
All right, want me to start over?
No.
No, but he outlined the financial needs of the city and what was in store for the city if we didn't address those needs. And basically he was saying the city was near bankruptcy and we had to make some changes. And one of those changes was, again, the home rule charter. And Regina had explained that process. And myself, after seeing his presentation, I was interested in how that works. So I put my name in the ballot and was elected, and hopefully contributing every once in a while to the making or creation of our new home rule charter. So, Kirsten.
There's probably a lot more of an efficient way to do this, but here we go. So my name is Kirsten Bester. I am a resident of Beaver Falls. I was born here in Beaver County. I grew up in Beaver Falls. I lived on College Hill. I lived on 6th Avenue in the middle of town. And I spent my teenage years down towards the Eastvale Bridge end of town on 6th Avenue. And I went to college here. I bought a house here. I raised my family here, moved away for a little bit, and then I came back. And I currently am employed by Westbanco Bank in Beaver Falls. I'm the branch manager there. And one of my most significant responsibilities there is to do business lending and to work with our larger volume clients. And one of those was the city of Beaver Falls. And I got the opportunity to get to know some of the people that were working in the city government. And we worked with the city pretty closely on some financial things, which are obviously not secret because all of this is government budget. But you know, it became apparent to me from the time that I started at the bank until even now that the city of Beaver Falls is requesting help. We have to do things every year, like a tax anticipation note, which is we get our payment up front for the year, what we think we're going to bring in taxes, so that we can do things like afford to pay salaries, afford to run the city the way it needs to be run. And not everybody around here has to do that. And it made me start to question why. And so instead of sitting back and complaining, my primary goal was to just try to get involved. I am really happy to have been able to serve on this commission, and I've learned a ton about what is possible through city government. And I'm really excited to share some of our findings with you tonight. One thing I do want to just say personally, on a personal note, every place I've lived has become a part of me, but nothing has ever been a part of me as much as Beaver Falls. And I really, the way I run my workplace is the same way that I run my home and my life. And I'm really guided by a verse that's in Jeremiah in the Bible, and it says, do good things for the city I sent you to. Pray to the Lord for the city that you're living in, because if there's peace in that city, you will have peace also. So that's why I'm here.
Okay.
She just said good luck, and after an introduction like that, there's no way that I can do as well as she did. Wonderful introduction. My name is Doug Carson. I'm currently a city councilman for the city of Beaver Falls. It seems like it wants to sag down. Okay. But it also seems like my voice is going out through the loudspeaker. Imagine that. So I have lived in the city of Beaver Falls since 1980. And Kirsten has explained, Kirsten's my daughter, and she's explained where we lived and moved within the city. We've very much enjoyed living in the city during our time here. As a city councilman, I had a up-close view of the information that Debbie and Michael, through the what they call the stamp committee. That's the slide previous to this. You saw STMP and the findings that they came up with, and that convinced me that we needed to look at a home rule charter. And I was excited about that. I've learned more about that. I'm more excited about the home rule charter today than I was when I started. And I've also watched the process play out in the big boys next door in Allegheny County. Became a home rule charter, changed their way of governing, and I watched that process, thought that was interesting. And I'm hopeful that the home rule charter can be of benefit to the city of Beaver Falls. That's why I ran, and I think we produced a document that can do that. Thanks.
Can I interrupt for 1 second? I think there's people that are stuck in the Zoom waiting room.
Okay. Let's let them in. If I can find them. Whoops.
I can learn to
No. Let's see here. Okay.
Hopefully everyone help yourselves to coffee, milk, water, monster cookie.
Okay, I think we have everybody in now. Someone take the remote. Oh, you have it. Okay, there we go. Sorry.
No problem at all. Good evening. My name is Neil McDowell. I'm a 1984 graduate of Beaver Falls. I coached basketball, junior high basketball for nearly 20 years here. I'm retired from the power plant down in Shippingport. So I ran for the commission because, of course, I love our city. I love Beaver Falls. I love our community. I'd like to get it back to how it was back in the day. if possible. But I ran for the commission because I love our city and I wanted to get involved in the community because I'm retired and I have nothing to do. So that's basically it. Thank you.
Okay, so my twin Neil and I are gonna play tag team because we're up next. So I am tasked with presenting the next few slides. So when we started looking at Home Rule Charter, we asked ourselves some pretty big questions, right? So here they are. So first of all, what is Home Rule? How is it different from our current city code? Why is it good for the city? And how will things change? And then we're gonna try to answer those for you tonight. And then we're gonna follow up with an opportunity for you to add your questions or concerns, because obviously we try to be a representative segment of the city, but we don't represent everybody, right? So we're really, really excited that you're here to join us tonight to share your thoughts and your feelings and your concerns and your questions. So next slide. Okay, so what is Home Rule, right? That's the big question, because up until probably about a year ago, I had no idea what it was. So I think what the most important thing to understand, first of all, is that as a municipality, the city of Beaver Falls is bound by a code that is written by our legislative body in Harrisburg, and we have to follow what it says. If we don't follow what it says, then we're not doing what the state prescribes, and we can lose our funding, we can lose our status. So what we have to do is basically follow the plan, right? So the plan is in place to keep us in motion, keep us going. But sometimes the plan doesn't fit everyone. So what we're looking at is a document that probably hasn't really been updated in its essence since like the 1950s. There's been additions, there's been things that have been removed, but it's assuming a lot of things about our city and about multiple cities throughout the Commonwealth that may not be necessarily true anymore, right? So what we were looking at, what we did is we looked at the differences, the things that we are actually able to change under Home Rule Charter, which is actually pretty surprisingly small. A lot of the things are going to stay the same. But we did look to find out, so under Home Rule, the basic authority to act in city affairs is transferred from the state laws in Harrisburg to a local control. So instead of us being bound by people who don't live here, who don't know the community, who don't know what our concerns are, our needs are, don't care about necessarily what the citizens are asking for, we have the opportunity to change some of those things. So under the current third class city code, we can only do what's permitted by law, okay? Same thing under Home Rule. We are still bound by the same laws. We really can't change laws at all. So, we can't say, oh, well, in Beaver Falls, it's now legal to pick your controversial topic, So what we can do, though, is we can look at the structure of our government and figure out how that is going to affect our future. So Home Rule basically is our chance to look at what we have, to look at what we can change, and decide if we want to change and how. So essentially, it's our opportunity to change things for ourselves rather than have a prescriptive measure from somewhere outside come in and tell us what to do. And quite frankly, as an independent person, I like the sounds of that. So now I'm gonna pass this over to my brother Neil, and he will take over from there.
Okay, this part of the article pertains to the structure of the government. As currently in the third class city code, as you can see on the slide. So I'll just read from the bullets. Currently, council members act as department directors. The city controller and the city treasurer are elected independently. City departments lack coordination. Council members take on both administrative and policy-making duties. Council members may or may not be qualified to run departments. So under the under the Home Rule Charter, it will be council members are policymakers and adopt legislation. Elected city controller and city treasurer positions are eliminated. City manager oversees the city department. Chief financial officer, which we do not have now, but with the charter, we will, oversees all financial management. And there are qualifications are established for all positions. That's it. Who's up next? Thank you.
Janice, make sure you pull up your pants. When you're looking at the slide and what Neil and Kirsten have talked about already, look at the title of the slide.
Yeah, closer, a little bit closer.
Where would you like me to be?
I'm just gonna move a little closer to you.
The charter includes strict financial management standards and more transparency. Eliminate the first half of that sentence. Strict financial management standards. Currently, all the financial doings of the city are guidance under some standard or so. But what the Home Rule Charter adds for us, all of you, me, and the board members, is more transparency. Think about that for a minute. And then look down at some of the bullet items there. If we had we don't have a laser pointer, all right. I'll just mention a few of them there. But before I go down through some of the bullet items, what I'd like to call your attention to is the arrow, the text inside the arrow there. And taxing flexibility is an important feature of the proposed Home Rule Charter. Currently, the city is at its taxing limit, except for the property taxes. Then it goes on to explain that. So we are at our limits under the third-class city taxing policy. What the Home Rule Charter will do will allow us some flexibility and including more revenue for the city. As you look down at some of them, and I won't go through all of them, the budget message is in plain language, which adopted budgets for every fund, city information site for all proposed legislation, capital improvement plan at public meetings for the adoption of budgets, and mandatory annual independent audits, and then of course all payments approved by council with a live signatures, which means the council members will have to add their signatures to the for the proposal. And then of course having formal procedures for purchasing and procurement ordinances, which means, for example, I'll pick on Mark Stowe because it's the name that comes to my mind first. He can't buy any equipment for the fire department from his best friend, his cousin, his uncle, etc. There has to be a bidding process. Typically, it's a 3-bid process, and of course, the lowest bid typically wins the contract. So, and how do we move these? Say again.
Regina advanced.
Oh, this illustration just gives you an idea how the funding changes. And then as you go, it goes from property tax burden down to these happy Beaver Falls citizens. And then of course, this shows some indication of where it's transferring, the burden's kind of transferring back to money, to funding for the happy Beaver Falls folks as it go. So, and then finally, this is slide 10. Is a simple example. Income 0.5% would cost the taxpayer $50 per $10,000 earned. Based on the median income of Beaver Falls residents, which is $35,368, would result, that 0.5% increase would result in $176.84, an increase in earned income tax per year. This would relieve some of the pressure on property owners who are on fixed income. So, and then Doug Carson's up next. Thanks, Michael.
Okay, so on this slide, which is pretty difficult for you to read, but the things I want to talk about are just highlight a few of these. This transfer, the Home Rule Charter will make the city manager be the overseer, the administrative overseer of all the departments. Let me just tell you how it works now on Third Class City. It's been alluded to on the slides. But when I was elected to City Council, eventually I became head of the Department of Public Safety, which is the fire department and the code office. It seems like it would also be the police, but the mayor handles the police. So I handle fire and code, neither of which do I have certifications or training in. And thankfully, in Mark Stowe, who's already been mentioned, our great fire chief, who now heads not only the fire department, but also the code department, has the professional certifications. And so, you know, these departments are running very well now. But I was directing those. Now what'll happen is under the Home Rule Charter, the city manager will oversee those departments and the administration, and the key people will be, as I've just described, the department heads. Those are the people that will have the certifications and the experience and the knowledge, and they won't have to deal with a city councilman who doesn't know those things interfering in their department. If I can simplify it, the council will be responsible for policies, and the city manager and the department heads will be responsible for implementation. In all the modern boards, when you have a school board operating, that's the way the good school boards operate. They set policy, and the administration, the school administration, enacts that policy. And that's what you want to have happen. And the way that the Third Class City Code describes it is really an archaic way, not a helpful way. So changing that. The other thing is the third one is proper certifications. I've talked about that a little bit. And I just want to highlight what we've said at a number of points, and that is that another key change in the Home Rule Charter will be having a chief financial officer, and that person will be non-elected. We had financial people before. Treasurer Danny Cellini, he did a great job for the city of Beaver Falls. Jerry Ford is controller, again, likewise a great job. But they had little pieces of a big puzzle. We need somebody that can see everything all at once and kind of be responsible for all of that, and then advise the city manager and advise the council. And that will be, in my mind, one of the biggest improvements between the Third Class City Code and the Home Rule Charter that we're proposing. The other items here just talk about professionally handling how you hire people. This is another very interesting one, and I'm happy that I got to talk about this too. Another interesting piece that we've written into our Home Rule Charter is the opportunity for citizen input through petition and or referendum. And what that means is if citizens, and I think ordinarily they would probably come to the city council and say, hey, we'd like to have an ordinance. We need a tree ordinance in Beaver Falls. My neighbors have these giant trees, and I'm afraid it's going to fall on, my house. So we need to have an ordinance that establishes, when you have a tree, these are the things that you have to be responsible for. And so you might come to city council and say, hey, we need a tree ordinance. And the city council might say, we're not really interested in doing that. Well, there's a method in our home rule charter that you can pick up a form, get 100 other citizens, around 100 other citizens in the city. They don't have to be Democrat, Republican, Independent. All they have to be is residents of the city who agree with your proposed ordinance, and then you bring it to city council.
We're going to move you just a little.
Yep, keep talking. We're trying to, we're going to make
just
sure we
move
can
you
get
to your
everyone
right.
into Zoom that's still
Yeah.
trying to get in.
Can you move to your
we
right just a little bit?
Yes.
And you can continue. We'll
Oh,
let,
keep talking?
yeah.
Oh, all right. Okay. So, sorry for that little delay here.
Yeah, sorry.
But so the deal is that if you have this ordinance, you got 100 people to sign, then you bring it to city council. Now, city council says, we don't care about these 100 people. We're not going to do it. Then you can take it to the election bureau and actually have it be a referendum on the ballot, that the people in the city will be able to vote on your proposed ordinance. And it can work both ways. It can be either a proposed ordinance, or it can be an ordinance that the council already voted on that you think is not good and you want it out. So that's a very interesting thing, and I think it gives the ordinary citizen of Beaver Falls more potential input into the governing process. And I'm excited that that's a part of our home rule charter. Then the final thing, and I'm really not going to. Oh, is it you? Yeah. Oh, okay. There you go. Thank you.
Sorry, I thought you had more than that. Did we skip something? Okay, so I'm just here to make clear what home rule cannot do. It can't make any laws that are going to be contrary to the United States Constitution, the Pennsylvania State Constitution, state laws, or any laws. And I think Kirsten alluded to that the charter can't go around just changing laws at our whim. That's just not something that is legal. We have to follow labor laws, environmental laws, municipal planning codes, crime code, vehicle code, and we're under the Sunshine Law, which is why this is, and all of our meetings are recorded and posted. Transparency is key. There is nothing that is hidden. Everything is out there for everyone to go through, ask questions. We do have a website. We have things posted on a YouTube channel. All of our meetings are on a YouTube channel. They're also on our website. We share them on Facebook. We try to get them out as many ways as we can. So the information is there. At this point, it'll be time consuming to try to go through it because we've had so many meetings. But I think the most interesting ones under the Sunshine Law that we recorded were all of the interviews with the city officials. Because we needed to know how is the government of the city working? We needed to understand that. So we interviewed everybody. And that is valuable information. If you can find some time to go back and look at those interviews, you will learn a lot about how the city is run. So if you have time, I would urge you to do that. The schedule that we had from the day we were elected, we had 18 months to try to get a draft together. And let me tell you how panicked that made me, because for a while I was feeling like, we're not making it. And I would like at this moment to thank Jerry Ford, who is not with us. He was so instrumental in finding drafts that other cities had come up with for their home rule charter that we could look at and say, oh, that might work for us. Well, that would never work for us. He compiled all this information that we could look at from Newcastle, from Johnstown, from Harrisburg. All of these places are under home rule. And it was nice to see what other cities did. And we knew what would work for our community, that maybe it worked for them, wasn't going to work for us. So we were able to look at that. And I just wanted to thank Jerry for that, since he's not with us this evening.
Actually,
So, oh, well, thank you, Jerry. So this is where we are now. We're right where we're supposed to be, which I was relieved to see. We have the draft. This is our first public meeting. We have to have another one. And hopefully by the second one, we will have that little kink with getting people into the Zoom meeting worked out. And September, which is next month, we have to send a final report. We have to submit that to the Election Bureau, because the question has to go back onto the ballot in November. And this is why the community needs to be informed. When the question goes back on the ballot in November, if the community votes no, don't proceed with it, it's dead in the water, we're done, the commission's got no more job to do. But if the community votes yes, keep going with that, then the commission will pursue, let's get this implemented, and we will no longer be under third-class city code. We'll just work towards home rule charter. So it's very important that you become informed before the November election, so that you can vote with informed, not just be very knowledgeable when you vote with the right information. So September, October, we're trying to get our public outreach, and hopefully those who are here tonight will reach out to people who you know and encourage them to come learn more, because we do have to have a second meeting like this. We need as many people to become educated as possible. It is vital that they get the right information, not rumors, not speculation. We need the information that is true and accurate in the hands of the community. And then we come to November 2nd, Election Day. As I said, questions on the ballot. If the community votes no, dead in the water, you stay third-class city code, nothing changes. But from the presentation tonight, hopefully you can see a little bit how it might be beneficial to think about, maybe home rule charter might work better for us. And at this point, I am going to turn it, questions, sorry. Your questions and comments, that's why we encourage people to attend our meetings. We needed input from the community. We didn't want to be the sole, well, we think this will work. We wanted the community to kind of help us guide those decisions. And this is a draft right now. The community can still look over the draft and say, oh, in this section here, I don't think that is going to work for us. Could we maybe look at changing this or that? This is the time where you need to start giving us that input. Copies are available. If you have your email addresses back on the sign-in sheet, you will get digital copies. You can send, we do have on our Facebook page, we have an email, not on the Facebook page, it's on our web page. We have so many pages now, where you can email us and we will get back to you, but you can absolutely submit suggestion, edit changes for us. This is just a draft. It is not final by any means. There are a couple drafts here in the front. We only had like 12. So we didn't want to offer those right away because we didn't know if we were going to get a crowd. I was hoping there'd be like 50 people or more packed in here, but we might have enough for the people who are present tonight if you would like it. The final report is also, we have a copy of that, and that has to be submitted. The city solicitor has to go over that and make sure everything, but we did have Bonnie here helping us with, is this legal? Can we say that? So we would like at this point to thank you for coming, to be enlightened, and hopefully you understand a little bit more what this is about. And if there's any questions, we do have wireless mics. I can, because we want everybody to be able to hear you. I will just grab a mic and. Yeah, yeah, well, I'm not going to answer the question. I'm going to leave the microphone. All right, our first question is coming from Jared Carson.
My question is, after the 18 months that you spent studying this, has the committee thought about what some of the short-term and long-term ramifications are if this is not adopted, particularly as it affects the city and its citizens?
Commission want to talk about that? I mean, they spent a lot of time researching that, and as Doug had suggested, the initial plan really showed some significant long-term deficits, and the only taxing ability the city has right now is the property tax. So they needed some taxing flexibility, but it was also the way the operations were working. So you're asking if there's a fallback plan if this doesn't go forward, and I'm not sure that they're really, I mean, the city will struggle, I believe, without the ability to move to a different form of government. That was one of the reasons we recommended it.
To piggyback on what Debbie said, as a financial professional working with the city of Beaver Falls, it's apparent that we're running a really tight margin. We have been for years. We've been in deficit positions in more recent years. So, you know, in plain language, we are not bringing in enough to operate the city as we've been accustomed to having it operate. And I don't know if any of us are particularly, you know, overjoyed with the way things are right now, but we definitely, all of us know, no matter what, we don't to go backwards, right? We want things to move forward, or we want to bring back some of the things in our communities and our city that we used to have. So in order to do that, we need money, right? So the same thing applies in the city as it does in our families and in our houses. You know, we have to make a budget, and it's got to be workable with what we have. And traditionally, you know, I like to work at a place where I hopefully get annual cost of living increases, right? The same thing applies to the city. The services that the city provides to its residents are not free. Obviously, we pay for those with our tax dollars, but every year our tax base is declining just due to people not choosing to live here in Beaver Falls. We do have a lot of people that work in Beaver Falls. We've got tons of employment actually that's happening right here in Beaver Falls. But under third class city code, we have real strict limitations on how we can tax our residents. Taxation is not a popular topic. Nobody wants to raise taxes. I don't want to pay higher taxes, and I'm sure neither of you do either. But I think that when we look at the structure of how taxation works right now, the biggest burden falls on our property owners, our residents. And quite a few of our residents, we're an aging population, and what we do not want to do is put an unfair tax burden on our residents that are on a fixed income. We do not want to put anybody out of their home. We don't want to impoverish anyone so that the city, you know, can function. But we do want to figure out a way to make up that deficit that seems fair. And that's why we looked at the types of taxation that we can do under Home Rule Charter. I can keep going, or I can stop. So we did talk about earned income taxes. And that seems like a fairer way to spread out the taxation burden on our citizens. Typically, people who are working have hopefully an opportunity to continue working or an opportunity to continue to advance. Homeowners on a fixed income don't necessarily have that option. So when we talk about raising the tax burden there, we did have to, oh, it's perfect, right, it's right up here. So if we raised the earned income tax on our taxpayers by 0.5%, that would generate probably $50 worth of extra money in the budget per $10,000 earned. So obviously we have this figure here, but does anybody remember offhand what that looks like when you take it into total, like how much additional money that puts into the budget every year? Anybody?
We
have that figure, and I apologize for not having that in the slides, but it's a pretty impressive number, and it's something that is probably, it's not negligible. All of our money, like all of us need every penny that we're making, right? But it is something that would spread out the taxation burden a little bit more fairly. You did ask what's the alternative to Home Rule Charter. So the alternative is we stay as third class city code, right? We don't have, nothing changes and nothing changes. And that could be great and that could be bad. we're bound by the law, by what Harrisburg says, and we have to continue doing it. The danger is that, I mean, over the past few years, we've been fortunate enough to have some people working with the city and city council that have been very, very diligent to help balance the budget and get the city back in the black. Shout out to Kevin Kunzelman for tons of work that he's put into that. And he was the one that kind of raised the alarm that said, look, if we don't make a significant change, if we don't start planning for the future, we're always going to be in this reactionary mode. And unfortunately, we may end up back in the red. And in the red is not a good place for municipal government to be. The hardcore end all be all would be Act 47, which is basically municipal bankruptcy under the state, in which the state comes in and we have to cut the services that we're offering to our citizens right now. We would have probably part-time police officers, maybe, our fire department gets cut, all sorts of other things. And part of coming out of that is to look at home rule charter. So we're trying to do this on the front end rather than the back end. There is a possibility that there would be no need for this. But I think that we're looking at an outdated, very not modern system of government. And again, it's prescribed for all cities across the state rather than us looking at ourselves and deciding what we think is best. So if I had to make a budget for my family, I want to make that. I don't want, this is my mother that asked the question, so it's really funny, but I don't want my mom to make it for me. I want to make my budget, and I want the opportunity to do that on my own before somebody comes in and tells me what to do. Does anybody want to add to that?
I would just like to add that under Act 47, this is really loud, my goodness. Nobody wants to bring a new business into a bankrupt city. That is not a good look. So whoever is thinking about, oh, I'd like to open a business there, if this city goes into Act 47, they're not coming. So we want to avoid that at all costs, just to keep attracting businesses. Because quite a few have come in that you may or may not be aware of. There's another question.
I actually have two questions. The first one is, how is the property tax going to work exactly? And the second one is, what happens to the positions that we have right now? For example, we're not going to have a city treasurer, but we have an acting city treasurer. Do we eliminate her job, or are these jobs going to be eliminated? Will there be a place for these people in our city government?
Yeah, so the way the charter's written, those positions, those elected positions, those duties and responsibilities go to a chief financial officer who still oversees the finance department. So in terms of specific people, it really doesn't impact. In fact, the charter specifically says, unless the charter eliminates a position, those positions remain intact. So that's entirely separate. Those decisions about who is employed in the future, those are separate decisions. The way the charter is written, those elected positions. So right now, and I know Doug touched on this, the financial management operation is distributed to half a dozen people. It's distributed to the controller, the treasurer, the councilman in charge of accounts and finance, to, an accountant that is hired by the city. City clerk does some of it, relative to payroll. The manager does some. So it's totally fragmented and uncoordinated. What the charter does is it establishes a chief financial management person. So I know, the last question was about taxation and flexibility, and that's an important part of the charter. But some of these other things in terms of financial management, I think are maybe even more important, because they set up a system of checks and balances and transparency that forces certain things to happen that are not currently happening in the city. And some of that is a coordinated financial management, but some of it, like Kirsten touched on, is planning for the future. Right now, you don't do a long-term capital plan for your roads and buildings and parks. This forces the city to do that. This forces an independent audit. It forces, formal purchasing and bidding procedures. So although, the taxing flexibility, don't get me wrong, is important and, is one of the drivers, some of this financial management, which I'm a financial management person and I know it bores everyone to death, but to me, it is like so basic and so important that if a city doesn't get its arms around that, they're not going to prosper. They have to get their arms around that. And to me, that is, part of the heart of the charter. And I would encourage you to read those sections related to financial management and transparency and the, requirements to actually do certain things that are not requirements. Now, I think those are important. And I know that's a long answer to your question.
So the question was, how would the taxing be implemented? So we know that's a concern. So we actually wrote into the charter that income from taxation cannot go up more than 10% in any given year. So it's not the sky's the limit in terms of taxes going up here now that we would be coming out from under the third-class city code. But we are trying to move that, as everybody has explained, shift that burden away from property tax. When you're in a city like ours, that all the land in the city is pretty well used up. We're not in an area that's growing where new housing developments are being built so that property tax income can keep on rising and rising. No, those days are over. So we need to shift. We're about at the top of the millage that the current third-class city code would let us go, and because of the people moving out, some blighted properties, the amount that we bring into the city from a mill of property tax is also going down. We want to shift that more to income, the earned income tax income. And we think that's a fairer way to do that. But we did put the cap. That's written into the charter. So you have that charter. You can go to that section on taxation, and you'll see that we put a cap in there so that you can be assured that it just can't go crazy.
Not eliminating property taxes.
If I could wave a magic wand, I think I would do that and say the fairer way is earned income tax, but I don't think it's going to go entirely that way. But I know that there's been some talk about a reduction in millage as if there's an increase in the earned income, EITC income. That is not written into the charter. Yeah.
Can you just differentiate? You said 10%, but you're not talking about the tax rate.
No, not the tax rate. That's the amount of income coming in from whatever it is that you decide. And that if we move the needle on the earned income, that brings a lot more income into the city. That amount is where that 10% comes from, not 10% on you. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad my daughter. Yeah.
And now the chief financial officer, that's decision which is made by the city council.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, I said the chief financial officer, that decision would be made by city council.
The city council would vote for that, but the
City council alone.
yeah, the city manager would be a very key person in terms of, bringing that person to the council to say, we've interviewed this person, here are the qualifications they have, and I'm sure council members would be a part of that as well, that interview process.
Now, would the citizens of the city be able to look at who you have chosen to be the chief financial officer before he's actually taken over the job?
Yeah, yes,
That's not written into the
it's
charter.
not written into the charter, but in terms of the process, the process would still be, always is a public process. So in a public meeting, the city council would vote. The question might be, practically, would you have enough time to know who that was, ahead of time? I would hope that the city council might have wisdom to involve ordinary citizens, maybe in the interview process, publicize who it is that they're intending to hire, and then, but it would always be done in a public meeting. There would be no way for the council to hire that chief financial officer without doing that in a public meeting.
And just to piggyback on that, Doug, the charter also sets out very specific qualifications so that it has to be someone who has the proper experience and the proper credentials, and then requires that person to be a member of the Government Finance Officers Association. So it has to be someone that's very familiar with governmental finance and has the proper experience and credentials. And the way I think it's written is the manager would recommend, so the manager would do the screening and the recommendation, and then it's with the consent of council. So ultimately council decides. But the manager has to make sure that that person meets all those threshold qualifications. Any other questions? Anyone has a burning desire to know? We're happy to. We could talk about this stuff all night. I know you don't want us to, but we could.
We could. We have.
Exactly.
We've talked about it for a month. So are there any concerns anybody has? Because we can call those out to you right now too. I mean, 'cause you don't have to have a question to have a comment or a concern. Okay, I'm gonna turn this off.
Well, if there's no concerns or comments and all minds are clear, I'm gonna say go eat Monster cookies and drink coffee and some good milk, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you
Let-
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Let me just say one thing. If you go to the city website, there is a link to the Home Rule website now. So if you have want more information, you can sign up also for additional documents. And if you go to the city website and go to our website, you can take the survey. We have a survey open that asks you some questions. It's on SurveyMonkey. You can log in and express your opinion. You can express comments. You can give us your opinion. So tell your friends, log on. We really, really want to hear what you have to say.